Welcome, everybody. I am Dr. Andrew Neville. Welcome to our live Q&A, where we're going to be talking about anything and everything that is adrenal fatigue related. What is it? What is it not? And why is it so misunderstood? Why does my doctor believe in it? What really is it? What about all these other conditions that are associated with it? There's tons of questions and misunderstanding with regard to this condition, which I am very well aware of. I've been specializing in treating adrenal fatigue for about over 20 years now. So I get it. I get it completely. I've heard it all. So what we're going to do is talk about all those various things. As you join in, I just want to hear from my crew as to whether or not they can hear and see me well enough. So they'll let me know. As we're getting set up, by all means, please give us your name and where you're from, where you're signing in from. We're very curious about any and all of that. While this session, right, this Q&A is, it's public, right? It's for everybody, but people that are in our current programs have some priority bidding as far as questions go. So I'm going to hit those questions on the early side of things. We have a ton of questions. I don't know why, but we have a ton of questions this time. Seems like we always tend to run out of time, but never questions. And if you're live and if you have questions, please post those questions in the comments. My coaches and my coordinators, they are handling the comments impeccably. They'll get those questions to me, so you have a little priority bidding if you're live as well. By all means, post those questions and we'll jump in. I think without further ado, I'm just gonna jump in because we have so much to go through. Let's get started. So first question is from Bob. Bob says, does over or under methylation play a role in adrenal dysfunction? If so, how? Okay, so methylation is a kind of general, kind of a ubiquitous biochemical process in the body. It's a fairly simple process. It's a process that's used by numerous organs and biochemical systems in the body. I mean, it's really everywhere, just this general methylation. And there are certain patterns. There are some old school docs, orthomolecular docs that used to talk about under methylation, over methylation, histamine responses, things like that, because you have to methylate histamine, all that stuff. And there are some patterns of, behavior patterns and physical or symptomatic tendencies, things like that. More recently, people talk about methylation with regard to methylation defects. MTHFR is one of the big ones, right? That people, this genetic testing is really kind of exploded. So people talk about these MTHFR snippets or gene mutations, things like that. I don't methylate well. Maybe that's causing all of my symptoms. Well, here's the thing. Everybody is on a continuum with how well or not well they methylate stuff. With regard to methylation defects, MTHFR, you can get this genetic testing. It is so common, so ubiquitous, these methylation defects, that I pretty much assume everybody has methylation defects these days. And we just tend to try to bypass that with some methylated or activated B vitamins. That's one of the primary things that methylation affects. The big thing is we want to remember this conversation of genetics versus epigenetics. So genetics is the blueprints that your body has given you. We do a lot of genetic testing, not us, but a lot of people do a lot of genetic testing these days, and that gives you all the blueprints. The key thing to remember is we do not read all those blueprints all the time. We read a certain set of blueprints depending on certain different states of physiology. And with regard to adrenal fatigue, which is really a stress response system dysfunction, you read a completely different set of blueprints when you're in fight or flight or stress physiology. Those are the blueprints of survival, generating energy, stuff like that, as opposed to the different set of blueprints when we're in rest and digest, vacation mode, healing, repair. That is the control that we have, is to shift that physiology. And this is pretty much what all of our work kind of goes towards. And hopefully you've been to my YouTube channel and you've heard me talk about this stuff. I tend to become the human seesaw. If you have not, Go to the YouTube channel. I've got tons of videos on there that are either condition specific or symptom specific, talking about all this various stuff and getting all the basics. Yeah, by all means, jump on that, and of course, follow us and like us and subscribe and share and do all that kind of stuff. Okay, Kim says, what more can be done about frequent waking and insomnia in addition to bedtime snack and Cerephos? So with stress physiology, right, where we are stuck here, too much stress physiology, especially the cortisol, adrenaline, things like that, but some other stress hormones causes a world of hurt biochemically in the body, causes damage. That leads to all the symptoms we associate with adrenal fatigue, including insomnia, but also fatigue and pain and brain fog and weight, anxiety, depression, all that stuff. Insomnia is one of the more common ones. The sleep issues are going to be a problem within the limbic system, HPA axis, cortisol, adrenaline pathway primarily. There are other secondary and tertiary effects that will be messed up as well, that we may have to pay attention to. The hypoglycemic diet is one of the basics, one of the key central pieces of the puzzle of our recommendations, because if the blood sugar drops, your adrenals have to fix it, right? So that's a stress on the adrenals. Well, everybody's blood sugar drops overnight, right? We eat dinner, we go around the clock to breakfast. That's 12 hours basically. Your blood sugar is going to drop, everybody's. Well, for most people, that's a minor stress, and we generate a minor response and we sleep right through it. Not patients with adrenal problems, right? We tend to make mountains out of molehills, right? We kind of over-respond to smaller stressors. So blood sugar drops, minor stress, major response. Now you can be wide awake in the middle of the night just because your blood sugar dropped. So eating a snack before bed is key, but so too is the hypoglycemic diet during the day. The more stable your blood sugar during the day, the more stable it will be at night. That's not the only reason we wake up, but it's a kind of a key one that we want to pay attention to. The other aspect of that, Kim, too, is salt, believe it or not. So making sure the salt is high enough, because if your salt drops, well, that's got to go, to the adrenals as well. Now the adrenals got to fix that, and they can be stimulated. Cerephos is one of the tools that we will use to help modulate the HPA axis. It's a common one. It works more in the hypothalamus pituitary. With Cerephos, typically, if a little works a little, more might work better, right? So if you're taking 1 to 2 and maybe at bedtime, 1 to 2 a little before, you could kind of safely bump that up a little bit, just incrementally, right? It's pretty safe. I've had patients take 3 and 3, 4 and 4. It really is safe. And if a little works a little, more might work a little better. There are numerous other aspects that can contribute to sleep issues that we will address, primarily in the various programs that we have. I like to, we've got to kind of gather more information and target things. And that does include some of the typical stuff that people will use, whether that's melatonin or L-theanine, serotonin support, even, tryptophan or 5-HTP. Sometimes these things can help. But a lot of times, by the time patients come into me, they've already tried a lot of that stuff and it hasn't done the trick. What I will emphasize is that the sleep hygiene aspect of this is really key. And this is stuff we kind of need to hear again and again and again. Just yesterday, I was in one of my group sessions with my patients within one of the programs that we run. And this patient's been with me for, I think it was closer to 6 months. And I still had to kind of reiterate some of this idea of, you've got to shut things down after dinner, right? We want lights to be dim. We don't want to do too much screen time, too much overstimulation. So she's like, yeah, but doc, that's when I'm most efficient. That's when I get all my stuff done. I'm like, yeah, but because you're getting all your stuff done, you're kind of jazzing your system up. That's why you can't go to bed till 1 p.m. So all that sleep hygiene stuff is really kind of key as well. When you stack enough of these pieces together, you will get that sleep to quiet. There are some other tools that we will use, but I can't, those are kind of practitioner specific. I can't necessarily kind of get too deep into those. Make sure those basics are dialed in first and foremost. That's really the key. Okay. So Nicole says, What's a good way to determine if high cortisol is not related to Cushing's, aside from taking scary tests? Well, the scary test is probably the big one. Endocrinologist wants you to do a suppression test, dexamethasone suppressant, AM blood test to test Cushing's. Okay, is there a way to naturally know if this extremely rare syndrome is not a factor? Okay, the first thing to look at, Nicole, is it is an extremely rare syndrome and condition where typically a pituitary tumor is constantly stimulating your adrenals to release cortisol. There are plenty of signs and symptoms that Cushing's comes with that also are somewhat associated with adrenal fatigue, these symptoms that we see, but in Cushing's, they are extreme. The cortisol values themselves are going to be extreme. So for instance, when we test for adrenal fatigue, we'll do saliva testing. Saliva testing is the best way to test for the adrenals because it gives us the free hormone level, the active hormone level, as opposed to blood test, which is free and bound hormone. Bound hormone is inactive. And actually, the bulk of our hormone is bound hormone. It's just floating around in the body, hormone bound to a protein, but not active, just like waiting to do something. It's the free hormone that's active. So the saliva testing is really the best way. If you had Cushing's, and we did that saliva testing, those levels would all be through the roof. They wouldn't be just a little bit high, they would be through the roof. Plus, you'd have a bunch of other symptoms with regard to that pituitary tumor that would go to Cushing's. So just by doing our basic program, as long as there's testing involved, you'll know whether or not you have Cushing's or not. And again, it is extremely rare. I've dealt with it, 20 years, thousands of patients with this. I've seen Cushing's a handful of times. Like I can probably count it on one hand. It's pretty easy for conventional doctors to determine and rule that out. So chances are that's not an issue. Okay. Nicole also says, part B, I suppose. I fell off the proverbial stress-free wagon. I've had some stressful social speaking events. I was really nervous the week before. I kept getting that feeling in my chest, point where you drop off a roller coaster. Makes sense. Now, weeks later, I'm still feeling it. At night, lightheaded, fatigued, chills, shivers. Yep. All stress physiology, terrible feeling of doom. What is that? Yeah, adrenaline. Yeah, adrenaline, cortisol. And there's some other stress hormones that we can't really test for that are in there. The hypothalamic, pituitary stress hormones, all of that cause all those symptoms. Next day drained, of course, right? Because you're cranked up on adrenaline. You've been running from a tiger all day. You're going to be drained. Drained, weak, can't move. Is that taxed adrenals? Yes. I'm going back to the basics in the core program. Okay, Nicole, don't ever let go of the basics of the core program because that's why they're basics. They are key basic things. So you want to hold on to those key kind of central pieces of the puzzle. Now, it is human nature for us as we do better, and Nicole's been on before, so I know she's doing better. As we do better, we feel better, we do a little more, and then we tend to let out the reins a little bit, right? We kind of let go of the things that actually we started in the beginning that got us better in the first place. Maybe we lighten up the diet a little bit. We take on a little more. Maybe we slip up on the relaxation exercise or, not resting quite as much because we don't really have to. And, all that is human nature. That is very typical. It's going to happen. So what happened? Now you dipped. The scary thing about the dips, everybody has dips. The scary thing about the dips is it feels like it did in the beginning. It's not the same. It just feels that way. You'll come out of this way faster. And the beauty is your body knows how. Your body knows the way because it's already done it. Just go back to the beginning, do what you did to get back to the place where you could do all that stuff, and you'll get there again. So hang in there. Okay. Anita says, again, so as for the new people, please let us know who you are and where you're from. We'd like to hear that. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. We're talking about adrenal fatigue, what it is and what it isn't. Largely what it isn't, right? So that there's this big question, right? Does adrenal fatigue even exist? Is it a thing? My conventional doctor doesn't believe in adrenal fatigue. So adrenal fatigue is a thing. The biggest problem is the naming of it. Like we don't have a good name for this condition that I specialize in, unfortunately. We call it adrenal fatigue, but it is a way bigger problem than a problem with just your adrenals. And this is kind of what everybody misses. And this is why we do this a little better than most people, frankly, because you have to treat the entirety of the stress response system dysfunction. That is what's causing the excess adrenal hormone, which is causing the damage leading to all the symptoms, including insomnia, anxiety, depression, all those various things. What conventional medicine does is it has a tendency to chase after these symptoms without much attention to the cause, right? Like you have depression, that's a thing in and of itself. You have depression, let me give you an antidepressant. It's just not that simple. Same thing with anxiety, same thing with sleep. I mean, if you're lucky enough to pick the right drug, you might cover up the symptom so that you don't see it anymore, but you haven't fixed this underlying physiology, and that damage, unfortunately, persists over time. So it's not like I'm against using meds for this. I'm not. But we can't use meds and think that we fixed a problem, because that underlying damage persists. So using meds alone, and you could do this in alternative functional medicine too, use an herb or a vitamin, you're just covering up a symptom. So to me, it's almost like you're putting a piece of tape over the check engine light in your car. Obviously, you're not going to fix the problem, and it's going to get worse over time. So I'm not sure how I got off on that tangent, but I'll leave that be. Anyway, this is a stress response system dysfunction that leads to all these various symptoms. And we know that is in conventional physiologic text. The problem is this information exists in disparate specialties in journals, whether it's the neuropsych research or the endocrine research, right? Or the psychology research or the stress physiology research. Like all this stuff is very well known. It's just that nobody tends to put all this stuff together kind of like we do. Okay, so back to Anita, sorry. Your thoughts on using bioidentical hormone creams throughout menopausal years into your 60s, 70s, and beyond. Do the benefits outweigh the risks? I have used them for about 8 years, now in my mid-60s. My functional doctor says, take them forever. Is there a risk and adjustment to quit cold turkey? Well, maybe quitting cold turkey is not the greatest thinking. However, we want to pay attention to why you were prescribed bioidentical hormones in the first place. Women have been going through menopause for a long time, let's say thousands of years, right? We've only had bioidentical hormones over the past, 50, 60, 70 years, maybe. Pretty crude in the beginning. They're a little better now. But women have been going through menopause, which is a normal, natural process. Menopause is not a disease, state, or a condition. Even after age 40, those ovarian hormones are going to gradually decline, 40, 45, 50. During that same time, and here's what nobody talks about. During that same time, the adrenals start to increase their production of that same ovarian hormone, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone. The adrenals increase that production. And what that does is that eases a woman through menopause without a hitch, no symptoms. In fact, postmenopausally, we test a woman's ovarian hormones. Most of them are coming from the adrenals, not the ovaries at all. So whenever a woman talks to me about menopausal symptoms, whether it's the flashes or the sweats or the dryness and the mood and all that stuff, that automatically brings me to the fact that that is an adrenal problem, not an ovarian hormone problem. Now, I didn't learn that in med school, just like most people don't learn that in med school, and that's why nobody talks about it. But that is fact. We know that in conventional physiology. Now, bioidentical hormones. I'm not against bioidentical hormones. They're okay. But in order to successfully get away from bioidentical hormones, we'd have to fix the underlying problem. So when you fix the underlying adrenal problem, and it takes putting enough of kind of the pieces of that puzzle together for everybody, we put enough of the pieces of that therapeutic puzzle together for you, and that will heal the adrenals, strengthen the adrenals. Now the adrenals can support the ovaries. It is far easier to be able to get off of bioidentical hormones in the future. It's not that they're a problem. It's just you shouldn't need them. That's really the biggest thing. You shouldn't need them. So there are some specific things that we do that help a little more than others. Pregnenolone is one that's really, really interesting with regard to this. It's a pre-hormone towards all of your adrenal hormones. but it's always a combination. There is no one thing that's going to help my menopausal symptoms. Can you give me that one thing that helps my insomnia, anxiety? And we're all used to that, right? Me too. My generation, the generation before me, we were raised with this concept of one drug for one disease, right? I have anxiety, take an anti-anxiety med. I have depression, take an antidepressant. I have a germ, kill the germ. It's all germ theory stuff. It's not that simple. We don't deal with conditions nowadays as much as we did when that concept, that whole model was purported. This stuff is much more complex. There's a lot more going on, and it really just isn't that simple. Anyway, Anita, the bioidenticals are fine. I don't have a problem with them, but it tells me there's some underlying problems. So that's what I would pay attention to. Okay, Melissa says, been diagnosed with CFS, been prescribed Adderall to deal with the extreme fatigue. Most days I'm so exhausted, I'm trying to survive the day. What can I do to help with the fatigue? Well, that is a huge question. So, adrenal fatigue to the nth degree, you will get half of those people that will develop chronic fatigue syndrome enough. They will be chronically fatigued enough to reach the CDC criteria for chronic fatigue syndrome, which unfortunately conventional medicine has no idea what causes it. But if they diagnose you with that, they can use an ICD-10 code and get paid from insurance companies, but they have no solution nor an idea of a cause. Just give you stimulants, right? Which is not a great answer. Another half of those people with adrenal fatigue to the nth degree, they will develop enough chronic pain to ultimately be able to be diagnosed with fibromyalgia by the CDC. And then there's a good chunk in the middle that can get diagnosed with both without a whole lot of attention to what that underlying cause is, because they don't know what fibro is either. They just throw antidepressants at that, which is, hit or miss, and mostly miss, unfortunately. Using stimulants to be able to get through our day, and whether it's Adderall or coffee and caffeine or sugar, right? What that means is you're kind of stimulating, you're jazzing your system up, right? You're giving it energy it doesn't really have. That energy's got to come from somewhere. And so to me, it means if you're using a stimulant, you are borrowing energy from tomorrow to pay for today. And that's not going to last very long. Eventually, you're going to have to pay the piper a little bit. So how do we fix chronic fatigue? Keep listening. Keep listening. Chronic fatigue is just a more extreme version of adrenal fatigue. That is what you have to fix. Go to my YouTube channel. This is way more complex than, can I just take this thing, right? Can I take a little ginseng or a little vitamin C or a little whatever, mitochondrial support? It's bigger than that, which is why there's no easy kind of quick fix answer. I know some of you want that, but chances are if you're here, you know that doesn't exist. You know that quick fix thing doesn't exist. You probably would have found it already if it did exist. There is a fix though. You can heal adrenal fatigue, aka chronic fatigue, aka fibro, which is anxiety, depression, whatever, chronic Lyme, long COVID. It doesn't matter to me what you call it. All that stuff has this same underlying cause, and you can heal it. It just takes it takes a little effort. It takes a little broader perspective and understanding. The way we used to heal this condition is we used to have people come and stay at our guest house on our property, right there. And people would come from all over the country for a couple of weeks, couple months to get treated for this. Now, by the time I would send them home, they'd already be feeling better, 6-8 weeks. Not fixed. You do not fix this in 8 weeks. And if anybody tells you they can, turn the other way. But they are feeling better. They're feeling their physiology shift, which has to happen. So they're feeling that shift. And then by the time they leave, they've got a plan. They've got an understanding of the plan. They got tools to implement the plan. So not only would they feel better quicker, but they would stay better longer because they knew what was going on. And to me, that's what healing is all about, right? It's about understanding what's going on, get ahead of it, know how to manage it, and then go live your life and stay away from as many doctors as you possibly can, including me. That's healing to me. Now, the challenge with that is most people don't have the resources, right, to come and hang out with us and get that level of care for a couple of months, right? So I've worked on different programs to be able to hopefully attain those same more successful results that those patients have, so people wouldn't have to come here to make that happen. The main way I do that these days is with our All Access program, which is kind of the Cadillac of what we do. It is the most efficient, most effective way to get ahead of this. It requires a ton of contact, figuring out what that puzzle is. It's definitely involved. If anybody has any questions about that, obviously just ask. My coaches will post links. Suzanne is manning all the comments. She's doing an awesome job. She will post a link to that. Just this year, however, I have put out a couple other programs that are a little more self-paced. It doesn't involve me as much, which has to happen because I can only see so many patients at a time. But I've kind of distilled all the advice I've given over the past 20 years into these programs, and they work. They definitely help. So again, just inquire, reach out to us, and Suzanne will provide a link and give you some guidance. I have patient coordinators who will talk to you, complimentary call, what makes sense, what fits, that kind of thing. Okay, enough of that. So Maureen says, please address the relationship between thyroid and adrenal fatigue. Can they be worked on simultaneously, or does one need to be addressed first? Great question, Maureen. So the thyroid's pretty simple. I mean, I know people try to make it out to not be that simple, but it's fairly simple. Like if you have hypothyroidism, you're basically going to be put on some form of thyroid replacement, right? Whether it's, somebody using Synthroid or a synthetic T4, or they're going to use a T4 to T3 combination, or they're going to use an MP or Armour thyroid, a natural desiccated thyroid. It's not that hard. It's not that hard. What nobody pays enough attention to is the fact that you can't possibly balance your thyroid or heal your thyroid or normalize your thyroid supplementation or hormonal support if you've got adrenal problems. Because what we know very definitively, and again, very definitively, is that excess stress hormone, aka adrenal fatigue, goes to the hypothalamic pituitary thyroid hormone axis and suppresses it in a comprehensive way and aggressive way. Now, again, just like I didn't learn this ovarian adrenal connection in med school, I didn't learn that in med school either. I was called out west. This is pushing 10 years ago. I was going to train some docs to treat adrenal fatigue. And I knew what I wanted to say, but, I got a little perfectionist streak in me, which, kind of contributes to my adrenal problems that I had. So I wanted to give them a good product, right? So I dig back into the research, and there right in front of me in conventional physiologic text, excess cortisol suppresses hypothalamic pituitary thyroid hormone axis. Even goes so far as to convince the thyroid to release an inactive form of thyroid hormone that we call reverse T3, that then binds up all these various thyroid receptors in the body just in case you miss suppressing thyroid anywhere else. The adrenals are the key. The adrenals are the key. You have to balance out the adrenals. I used to think of the adrenals, the ovaries or testes, and thyroid as a three-legged stool. I was wrong. The adrenals call the shots because, and again, we know this definitively, fact, stress hormone suppresses that hypothalamic pituitary thyroid hormone axis and also suppresses the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian hormone axis. We know this. And it makes sense too, right? Like, who cares about your period? Don't really care about your sex life. Probably not a good idea to try to procreate now. There's a tiger in front of us, like we'll be dead, right? So we tend to be very aggressive at shutting those things down. Also the digestion, also the immune system, right? We suppress all that stuff when we're in stress physiology. That is what we have to fix. Okay. Carol Ann says, does the root cause of adrenal fatigue have to do with the mitochondria? If so, would you explain how that is so? What would be the best way to help mitochondria? If not, does adrenal fatigue have anything to do with mitochondria? Does it involve mitochondria in all or just parts of our body? Well, you can't be selective with the mitochondria. If you damage mitochondria, you damage all of them. Just for everybody's sake, mitochondria are the little energy producers in all the cells. Take you back to your high school biology class. Little battery packs, little energy producers. What they do is they take energy from food and turn it into a universal form of energy called ATP that the body can use to do stuff. Anything, everything. Think a thought, move a muscle, build a neurotransmitter, detoxify, all comes from the mitochondria. The mitochondria are a highly susceptible part of the cell, susceptible to damage. The main problem or susceptibility there is what we call oxidative stress. Oxidative stress goes back to free radical production. The number one cause of free radical production in our bodies, stress physiology. Think about it this way. The metabolic exhaust of fighting tigers inside our body, which is what stress physiology is, the metabolic exhaust is free radicals. Free radicals are little electrophilic molecules that bounce around in the blood, nicking and damaging tissue, including mitochondria. Because they're in the blood and because the blood goes everywhere, the damage is everywhere. So that's what causes some of the fatigue, some of the brain fog, some of the other kinds of symptoms, poor detoxification, all that stuff. So there is always mitochondrial dysfunction with adrenal fatigue. You can try to fix the mitochondria, right? And we do to a degree. And you can take very fancy, expensive things and programs. Let's fix the cells, repair the cells and all that stuff. But if your physiology, if you still have adrenal fatigue and your physiology is still stuck in fight or flight, you're still constantly damaging the mitochondria. So people that chase after this cellular thing, right, mitochondria, you sell a bunch of supplements. It's like if there's a big storm, right? Storm's going on, terrible storm, and it's ripping, the shingles off your roof, right? The roof is leaking, right? You'll get somebody say, oh, well, there's water coming in your house, like your roof is leaking. You got to fix your roof. Like, okay, well, that's obvious. Let me buy that. Like, I'll buy some shingles. But what if the storm never goes away? Well, you probably sell a lot of shingles that way, right? But what we've got to do is get you out of the storm, right? Heal the adrenal fatigue, balance this physiology. Now we can effectively heal the mitochondria for good instead of chasing after this secondary dysfunction, which is what so many people do. Let's chase after the mitochondria. Let's chase after the immune system stuff, the EpsteinBarr, the Lyme, it's IBS, it's Candida, it's food allergies, it's leaky gut, it's chasing after all that various stuff, right? These are secondary dysfunctions. Trying to fix those systems while your body is still suppressing them is like pushing a car that has the parking brake engaged. Oh, it's a whole lot more effective if you just release this brake. Then you don't have to chase after this stuff, right? Okay. Connie says, let's see, with a history of, here it is, right? So with a history of Epstein-Barr, herpes, Lyme, co-infections, mycoplasma, Bartonella, one or two parvo, chlamydia, you name it, right? I know all those viruses. What are the odds of addressing the bacteria and viruses that will make a difference with healing the adrenal loop? Minimal. I'm going to use Epstein-Barr as an example, but these are all the same. My Epstein-Barr used to reactivate all the time, and I had it tested once or twice, but I realized I would just keep getting sick in the same way. It was the same picture of Epstein-Barr, right? So I was getting sick, and then my doctors, not conventional doctors, they didn't pay attention to it, but my naturopaths, right? I was in naturopathic medical school before I figured this stuff out. They're like, yeah, it's your Epstein-Barr. Let's treat that. Okay, let's treat that. I feel a little better. And then it come back like 2 weeks later, here I am again, right? Or a month later, right? Constantly chasing it, right? So what I realized was Epstein-Barr, right, is a herpes family of viruses, and all these are the same, in that you get one of these viruses, the immune system tackles it, knocks it back enough, and then it lies dormant in your body forever. You never get rid of it. In some people, Epstein-Barr and herpes simplex virus 1 or 2. These viruses will reactivate in certain people. But why? Same virus. 95% of the country has Epstein-Barr. Why does mine reactivate and my neighbor's doesn't? The problem's me, it's not the virus. Same virus, right? The problem's me. Okay, so let's take that a step further. And fair warning, I'll drive some patients crazy and doctors crazy too, because I'm always asking why. Like, okay, why? So my immune system isn't strong enough to keep Epstein-Barr at bay. Why? The number one controller of your immune system, stress physiology. We know very specifically that when our body is in stress physiology, that stress hormone goes to the immune system and causes a very predictable shift. In the research, they call this a Th1 to Th2 shift. You can research that or go to my YouTube channel. I think I probably talk about that. The Th1 side of your immune system is the side that fights infection. That gets suppressed. Th2 side is the side that creates antibodies to things. That gets amped up. So suppressing the side that fights infection, now you're going to be vulnerable. Chronic infections, reactivations, cold sores, Lyme, mycoplasma, all that stuff, right? Think about Lyme. Why do some people get Lyme? They take the antibiotics or whatever, then they don't have Lyme anymore. Whereas other people are developing this chronic Lyme, and it's not the Lyme, it's the immune system, right? The immune system's not strong enough. Why is the immune system not strong enough? Again, this is not the only, but the main controller of your immune system is that stress physiology. I go to these last thing I'll say, Connie, is I go to these conferences for chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, right? The IACFSME. And for decades, these PhDs, brilliant doctors, have been chasing after the bug that causes chronic fatigue or fibro, right? And you've got brilliant people, and they've got solid research. It's the Lyme, it's connected to, it's the Epstein-Barr, it's the Enterobacter, it's the parvovirus, it's mycoplasma, and the research is there. Is there a connection? Yes. But does that equal causation? No. No, it can't be that every one of these viruses is causing the same syndrome. It's the fact that the adrenal fatigue, the suppressed immune system, is make us vulnerable to all these various viruses and things. That's what has to be fixed. Otherwise, you just chase after this stuff for decades. And that's my goal, is just to help you to not have to chase after that stuff forever. That's the key. Because I did. I mean, that's why I do this, right? It's because I dealt with that. I went on the specialist merry-go-round. I went to all the various doctors, chased all this various stuff, right? Trying to expedite that process. I mean, I can't tell you how many new patients I see on a weekly, monthly basis, and their stories are all different, but there are similarities in all those stories, right? They have been to all these various specialists. They've tried all this other stuff. I treated Candida. I detoxed, but I got to detox again and again and again. I got to retreat Candida. I got to keep chasing it. If you have to constantly be treating this stuff, there's a deeper problem. That's what we want to get to. Okay. Lane says, I'm in the core program. Being around people a lot sends my stress levels through the roof, but it's not possible for me to not be around people, and it's throwing my healing off. Gotcha. Went on vacation a week ago, felt absolutely amazing. Awesome. I came back to regular life, and the palpitations and sleep disturbances came back. I don't know what to do. So Lane, that's a common story. And I love that story, because all you did by going on vacation was you turned off the fight or flight and turned on the rest and digest physiology in your body. You turned on your parasympathetics. And I've heard that story numerous times where I just shifted that physiology, and literally in some cases, all my symptoms went away. I've had chronic fatigue for years, and all of a sudden I go on vacation and I can walk and hike. I haven't slept well for so long, and all of a sudden, within a day or two, I was sleeping. That is an amazingly powerful experience. And what that means is we have to take vacation physiology and recreate that in your life. Now, that's easier said than done, of course, right? Because we get into the real world. Now we got all these various, responsibilities and things like that, but it absolutely can be done. The challenge with chronic stress over time, the stress response system, not just your adrenals And if you want edification on this, I explain to some of my YouTube channels. My mini course is great at this. But it's the hormone, nerve, limbic system side of your stress response. With that stress response system dysfunction, that system gets sensitized and we get trigger happy. So we got to rewire that, right? So ultimate goal, create space in your bucket, pay some attention to various stressors and demands and just back off a little bit. Don't eliminate all people, but some, maybe, or at least groups, like too many all at once, right? Just kind of tighten your circle a little bit. To whatever degree, this bucket doesn't discriminate on all these stresses, right? Some stress, okay, you have people, I don't know, let's say it's work, right? Well, you need to work, so we're gonna have to accept that stress. Now we gotta pay more attention to these various other stresses because the bucket doesn't discriminate, it doesn't care what you scoop out of it. But also over time, by healing your stress response system, limbic system, hormones, nerves, heal that system, that makes the bucket bigger. That drops to level 2. Now there's tolerance. Now you can start to shift this physiology on a more daily basis, on a regular basis. Okay? That's the key. Don't lose track of the basics. Lane, go back to the beginning. Make sure you're dialing in all those basics. Relaxation exercise. Shift that physiology. Vagus nerve exercises, hypoglycemic diet, salt, all those various things in conjunction. Some people need more support. That's why we do have these stepped programs. If the one you're in isn't enough, then you might want to step up. Testing really helps. And, there's guidance that we can provide, and again, just reach out to us. Just shoot us a note. Okay. Jessica says, doctor tried to put me on bioidentical hormones. I had low progesterone, slightly low estrogen. I told her I wanted to dig deeper, which is good for you, Jessica, although most doctors don't know about it. Is adrenal fatigue the underlying problem for that? Yes, I already answered that. For reference, my cortisol was low normal. I had COVID during the test. Well, if you had COVID, your cortisol should have been high because COVID's a stress, right? Again, I would put COVID. I just talked about Lyme and Epstein-Barr, mycoplasma. Put COVID in there too. Long COVID, it's adrenal fatigue, right? I mean, to the largest extent, it is adrenal fatigue. So, Jessica, I'll refer you back to the previously. I took a chunk of time to answer that bioidentical hormone question. The issue here is absolutely right. The need for the bioidenticals is that stress physiology suppressing ovarian function. Again, most doctors don't pay attention to that, but the key is to treat the why, shift this physiology, tackle that adrenal fatigue. It's not that simple. Well, I mean, there's a lot to it, I should say. It's kind of simple, but there's a lot to it. But just go back to my other answer there. Sorry about that. Mary Lynn says, I have a question about low IgA and low vitamin D, elevated parathyroid hormone. How is this connected to adrenal fatigue? IgA is immunoglobulin. IgA is an immune marker, basically. So we use IgAs as a general marker for immune system dysfunction. And most of the time it's low. Sometimes it's high with adrenal fatigue, right? Again, we know specifically that elevated cortisol from stress over time suppresses the immune system, and low IgA is evidence of that. So that's a hallmark. In fact, before we had cortisol testing, like salivary cortisol testing, people would use IgA as a marker of adrenal fatigue, right? They would check that level. Most of the time it's low, sometimes it's elevated, pretty much a hallmark of adrenal fatigue. As far as vitamin D goes, pretty much the whole country is low in vitamin D, unless you are so low in latitude. You're talking kind of lower Texas and Florida, but even there, we slather ourselves up with all kinds of goop to prevent the UV radiation from activating cholesterol into vitamin D and all that. It's incredibly common. Low vitamin D is very common. Low vitamin D doesn't cause adrenal fatigue, but having low vitamin D doesn't make it any easier to heal from adrenal fatigue either. We need vitamin D, which will come from the sun, but it also comes from fat. Right? One of the problems with our diets today is that we're not allowed to have fat anymore, right? We're not allowed to have saturated fat like vitamin D, vitamin A, vitamin K, fat-soluble vitamins, incredibly important. They work almost more like hormones than they do vitamins. It's crazy. So it's important. It's important to get your vitamin D level up. And I tend to use fat soluble vitamins in the vast majority of my patients. Cod liver oil is kind of my preferred way. Parathyroid hormone is a little bit different. I wouldn't put that directly connected to the adrenals. Okay. We're getting through it. There's a lot. I appreciate your patience. And anybody new, tell us who you are, where you're from. Throw some information out there. If you have any questions, put them in the comments because that'll get you bumped up as well. But we'll get to as many as we can. Jay says, recently had a test that shows my cortisol goes up at night and I have adrenaline and insomnia, and the next day I feel sick and awful. Not sure what I can take to lower this and be able to sleep. Yeah. So it's a common symptom, right? If your cortisol goes up at night, if you have adrenaline and if you have insomnia, you have adrenal fatigue. Here's the problem. If you have adrenal fatigue, you don't just have adrenal fatigue. What you have is a broken stress response system dysfunction. That's what has to be fixed. And it's just more complex than taking something for it. Again, we're all raised in this society with, it's one drug for one disease, right? I have anxiety, take an anti-anxiety. I have insomnia, take a hypnotic or, one of those things. You probably tried those things. And people would tell me, right? Like, doc, if you could just get me to sleep, my adrenal fatigue would heal. I'm like, okay, maybe. But in order to get you to sleep, I have to heal your adrenal fatigue. The sleep problem is a problem somewhere with the limbic system, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal hormone axis. That we have to figure out what that is. We have to get that corrected. And it's multifactorial. There's no one thing. I do use supplements and vitamins. I'm not saying I don't. But they're just that. They are supplementary to a bunch of lifestyle and kind of dietary modifications and shifting, turning on vacation mode in all these various ways. Again, which I've talked about a lot on my YouTube channel. Again, there's a lot to this, right? Which is why it's hard. I mean, most of my patients come into me. It's not like they're not better for a lack of trying. Like people that develop adrenal fatigue, like we tend to be cut from the same cloth to a degree, right? We're pretty persistent at this stuff. And it's not that you failed kind of even other treatments. It's those treatments, those practitioners, they have failed you. They're targeting either one aspect of this, even adrenal experts, right? They're just focusing on the adrenals. Well, there's more to it. What about the nerve side? What about the limbic system in the brain, right? You'll have some docs that just focus on the limbic system. Well, what about the other parts? Or worse yet, some will focus on, hey, it's your immune, your digestion, your ovaries, your thyroid, or it's it's these symptoms that are causing, like, when you focus on this true kind of underlying cause, which takes effort on both our parts, it takes effort. When you focus and fix that true underlying cause, you will shift this physiology. And when you do that, the symptoms, right? Sleep, anxiety, depression, weight, brain fog, all that's energy, those symptoms will gradually decline over time. And at the same time, you will gradually feel more of yourself with increased intensity, frequency, and duration over time, right? Whether that's energy, mood, cognitive function. I see it happen on a daily basis, but we got to focus on this cause. We got to stop chasing this ancillary stuff, right? It's a waste of time, energy, and money, unfortunately. Okay. Kaylee says, hi, Dr. Neville. I was diagnosed with non-Addison's adrenal insufficiency, which those are the only couple things that conventional medicine will pay for. Addison's is complete failure. Just short of that is non-Addison's adrenal insufficiency. It's kind of a more extreme version of adrenal fatigue. Same thing though. In 2015, after what felt like a nervous breakdown, adrenal fatigue, crash, whatever, I did a ton of research, healed myself, doing better. Most of my symptoms subsided, still often lethargic. Okay. In fact, the last 5 years, needed a nap almost every day. I work, I have kids, ambitious, things I want to do in my life. Of course, you're ambitious. Anybody with adrenal problems, we're ambitious. We're doers, and we care about what we do. So we do things well. And then people come to us because we do things well. And then we do too many things because that feels good. We get those accolades, right? Now we become a little overachieving, perfectionist, a little type A maybe. Sound familiar? Show of hands. Me too. Anyway, I've struggling with energy levels. I've seen all kinds of doctors, allopathic, naturopathic, psychotherapists. Everyone says my labs are fine. Very common. I just need the rest. You do. What's your take? You do. You need rest. Any suggestions on how to get my energy back? I'm 39. I feel like I'm 80. Yep, pretty common. Doc, I feel like I'm twice my age. So the big thing, Kaylee, is you got to get assessed, right? We got to know kind of where those hormone levels are, right, to find out what's going on. We need the picture, right? We need that whole picture. We need to know where the stress hormones are, the cortisol, the whether it's adrenaline, DHEA levels. We need to know all that. We know all the symptoms, right? And when you do that, and when we assess and treat in this holistic way, the energy will increase incrementally over time, and it needs to, right? And it's patients kind of go up and down as they get better and better. But what I see in my practice is I see patients incrementally get back on their feet, little by little by little by little. Some faster, some a little slower, but incrementally they get back on their feet. And that's, they call me to task to make sure that's happening. And I'm there to kind of guide them every step of the way, either me or one of my coaches. I've got some coaches that I've trained that do this in some of the other programs. It absolutely can happen. You don't have to feel like you're 80. But if you have hormones, for example, if your DHEA is that of an 80-year-old, well, you're going to be hard-pressed to get better. But that is one piece of this bigger picture. Reach out to us. We don't do everything well. I'm not a one-size-fits-all kind of a person. This is what I do. And we tend to do it well. I've been doing the same thing for 20 years, and I've distilled kind of all this information in these various programs. So there's always an option. There are always answers, right? No matter where somebody can intervene. Most effective way, yes, is that all access. And I still have some patients that I work with that I'll do one-on-one stuff, if that's an option for you. But there's other options. So just reach out to us. Even here, reach out in the comments. My coaches will get back to you. Greg says, why does lovemaking cause, now we're getting into it, I like it. Why does lovemaking cause prolonged fatigue and electrolyte imbalance with adrenal fatigue? How do we heal the nerves and the hormones? So the gonadal systems are hit, both men and women, with stress physiology over time. We suppress our hypothalamic, pituitary, ovarian, and testicular hormones, which takes a hit. So that's the first thing, right? So we'll see kind of low testosterone type symptoms, low libido in general, right? But if we think physiologically about this process, and I tend to think physiologically, the nerve side of the stress response system is your autonomic nervous system. That's the part of the system, the nervous system that controls all the organs in your body. Every organ, liver, heart, eyes, sweat glands, kidneys, penis, vagina, everything is wired to this autonomic nervous system. So the act of arousal is actually more of a parasympathetic type of an experience, and for rest and digest basically. And people with adrenal fatigue, we're not that good at this parasympathetic thing. We tend to be sympathetic, which is where all that stuff's shot, or at least shut down a little bit. In guys, it can be certainly lack of interest, but erectile problems, things like that. In women, of course, more libido issues and other hormonal issues. Let's say take normal physiology. Arousal is parasympathetic. The act of orgasm is actually a sudden shift to sympathetic for orgasm, both men and women. Well, that's actually a taxing experience in someone whose autonomic nervous system is somewhat compromised. So you can feel fatigue. I remember I had one woman who, every time she was intimate with her partner, she would crash for like 2-3 days. I'm like, well, you got to tone that down a little bit, right? And kind of back off a little until we fix this underlying problem. And that doesn't take so much energy out of you. Plus, there's energy involved with being intimate, right? That's what causes the problem. Electrolytes, that has to do primarily with the salt. That's what the adrenals do, is help you to hold on to salt. So last part of that question, how do we heal the nerves and hormones? Greg, go back to everything else that I just talked about, because it is this holistic, we heal the nerves and the hormones by figuring out what your therapeutic puzzle looks like. And there's some common pieces in everybody, but everybody's is a little different. Figure out what that puzzle looks like, put enough of the pieces of that puzzle together all at the same time, get that physiology to shift. You can live your life again, right? You can be intimate and make love and not have to crash afterwards in that way. It does happen. I see it happen all the time. It's a little more complex than just taking, can I just take some testosterone, right? Like, it's more than that. Okay. Let's see. So how's our time? All right, we got 5 more minutes. We're doing all right. Dustin says, is pancreatitis related to adrenal fatigue or autoimmune disease? Mainstream medical thinking says chronic pancreatitis cannot be cured. It's progressive, shortens your lifespan. Do you agree? Can your program reverse and cure chronic pancreatitis? I'm not a pancreas expert, although when you deal with adrenal fatigue, you're dealing with the autonomics. You're dealing with pretty much every organ in your body. So I'm pretty well-versed in what the digestive system does, including the pancreas. And I've had exposure to patients with chronic pancreatitis. Conventional medicine doesn't generally pay attention to the why. They're just like, okay, you have chronic pancreatitis, without attention to the why. Why is that happening? If you also have adrenal fatigue, if you have chronic pancreatitis is not a symptom of adrenal fatigue. Although if you have adrenal fatigue and your physiology is shifting, you are compromising your whole digestive tract, including the pancreas. So it can be one of these predisposing factors that'll set somebody up for pancreatitis. In fact, all my patients tend to develop lots of itises, right? Itis just means inflammation medically. And because your adrenals are your main anti-inflammatory, then, that's a big issue, right? So all my patients develop inflammatory bits. What I would look at, Dustin, is look at the rest of the symptoms. If you just have pancreatitis and you don't have any other adrenal symptoms, don't go chasing adrenal fatigue. It's not your problem. But if you start having some energy problems, sleep, pain, weight, brain fog, anxiety, depression, blood sugar, blood pressure, if you have immune, digestive, reproductive, if you start ticking off the rest of these boxes, then by healing your adrenal fatigue, you set your physiology into balance. Now you're creating a physiology that is anti-cancer, anti-aging, and anti-inflammatory, chronic pancreatitis or not. Plus you're turning on your vagus nerve, and that turns on the digestion. Now at least you give the pancreas a shot. So there's more to it. Okay. Tom says, let me see how I'm doing. Tom says, we're good. A couple minutes. And again, just before people drop off, I'll answer at least one, maybe two more. If you have any questions, reach out. Reach out here in the comments. Reach out through the website. Suzanne will post links to my patient coordinator call, who you can talk to, complimentary conversation. Talk about, what does this look like? Is this really a thing for me? Does it make sense? And what are the options moving forward? I want to talk to Dr. Neville. I will still, I still see new patients on a regular basis. I want to talk to Dr. Neville. How do I make that happen? What are my options moving forward? By all means, reach out. But again, if you have any questions, concerns about adrenal fatigue, just, put them down there. We'll do what we can to answer them. If not now, next time. Okay, this might be the last question. Tom says, how often is it recommended to get retested for adrenal fatigue supplements? I've been on the same protocol for 10 years, and I'm not sure if this is typical or atypical. Well, you shouldn't need supplements for 10 years. To me, that tells me something's missing in your protocol, right? Because what we do is we ramp up somebody's treatment. And again, Tom, it's not just supplements. It's all this other stuff, right? Lifestyle, dietary. It may be that you're missing some of these other pieces of the puzzle, which is why you're needing these supplements for so long. We ramp up somebody's care, stabilize them, okay? Get this to stabilize, keep them there for a period of time, variable, and then eventually get people off these supplements. I use supplements, but I want people on those supplements long term. I mean, they're safe to do that, right? But you shouldn't have to, right? If we have to long term, it means we're missing something, or your practitioner is missing something. It's not uncommon. There's a lot of practitioners out there who are aware of adrenal fatigue, but I'll tell you, I find that when they might even test and find it, but when they do, most of the time I've learned that they've just grabbed a hold of a tail of something that is way bigger than they anticipated. You got to treat the whole entirety of that stress response system. That is what is key. And as far as testing goes, I might test somebody every, 6 to 12 months, saliva testing, that kind of a thing. Okay, I'm going to take a breath. We're right up on it, right up on the hour. We will do this again. The reason we are doing this is to get as much information out there as possible, to catch people as soon as possible. So by all means, if any of this was helpful, great. Reach out. We'd love to hear from you. But if you think it'd be helpful for anybody else, please share it. Please like us. Please follow us on YouTube, Instagram. Get on our email list. We're constantly doling out information based on the successful way that we've treated this for 20 some years. And honestly, my predecessor treated it 30 years before that. Nobody today has been treating adrenal fatigue with the history and experience that we have. I mean, that's just the reality. So we've gotten pretty good at it. You can heal. Okay, so hold on to that idea. You can heal and shift this physiology. Sometimes it takes a little work by both of us. Okay. All my best, everybody. Take good care.